Welcome to Life Stories, where the people you trust the most can become strangers, and sometimes a stranger becomes your only salvation. Imagine standing by someone's deathbed, holding their hand as they take their final breath, and realizing you're the only one who showed up. No husband, no family, just silence. And then, a letter, a key, and one chilling line. Now they will learn what it means to be forgotten. This isn't just a story about inheritance. It's about betrayal that hides behind birthday cards, about love that never arrived, and the unexpected legacy left behind when a woman who died alone refuses to be silenced. If you think you know your family, this story might make you think again. Stay with us. What comes next will break your heart, and maybe put it back together in a way you never expected. Let's begin. Emily Harper stood alone in room 316 of St. Jude Memorial Hospital as the last breath escaped from Holly Walsh's lungs. It didn't sound like it does in the movies. No beeping monitor cutting to silence, no frenzied CPR, just a soft, endless hum, and the slight wheeze of air slipping away, like a candle losing the last flicker of its flame. Emily didn't cry. She didn't speak. Her fingers stayed wrapped around Holly's cooling hand, more out of disbelief than grief. After 72 sleepless hours, after dozens of unanswered calls, and after a marriage that now felt more like a paper contract than a vow, this was how it ended. Quiet, empty, forgotten. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Her scrubs were crisp, her clipboard hugged to her chest like a shield. Her voice was practiced but not cold. "Miss Harper, are you okay?" Emily nodded, mechanically, falsely. The hallway outside buzzed with life. A child laughed somewhere near the waiting room. A young couple celebrated with balloons. But here in this stale, fluorescent room, time had stopped. Nate hadn't come, nor had Chelsea, not even a courtesy text. And Emily, despite everything, still found herself scanning the doorway every time someone passed, hoping, stupidly, that maybe they'd show up just in time. They didn't. "I'm sorry," the nurse said, a softness in her eyes. "Before she passed, Mrs. Walsh asked me to give this to you." She extended a sealed envelope. The name on it was written in Holly's hand, sharp, precise, slanting slightly to the right. Emily hesitated, then took it. It was heavier than expected. Something was taped to the inside. A key. And below that, in the single line of handwritten text that would set everything in motion. "They never loved me. Now they will learn what it means to be forgotten." Emily didn't react, not outwardly. She folded the letter and slipped it into her coat pocket, thanked the nurse, and finished the paperwork like someone sleepwalking through her own life. When she walked out of the hospital, the late afternoon sun seemed to mock her with its brightness. She sat in her car for 20 minutes, not crying, not moving, just existing. Alone. Back home, Nate finally called. His voice was casual, breezy. "Hey babe, you pick up groceries? We're out of milk. Oh, and how's my mom?" "She died," Emily replied. Silence. Not the kind that means shock or heartbreak, but the kind that scrapes. Then, "Oh, when?" 3:42. "Right. Yeah. Sorry, I had a packed schedule today." She hung up before he could finish the sentence. There was nothing else to say. That night, Nate came home late. He didn't ask about the death certificate. He didn't ask what time the cremation was scheduled. He didn't even mention the letter. But Emily hadn't forgotten. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the key from Holly's letter digging into her palm. The words repeated in her mind like a drumbeat. "They never loved me." By morning, she was behind the wheel of her Subaru, the address from the letter punched into her GPS. The road led her out of Portland, past the suburbs, through forests, and finally down an almost hidden gravel path. A wrought iron gate hung ajar like an invitation. The cottage beyond looked like something out of an old novel, small, weathered, and wrapped in wild ivy. The paint had peeled, and the windows were fogged with age, but it was beautiful in the way forgotten things often are. The key fit perfectly in the door. Inside, it smelled of lavender and dust. A lifetime lived in silence. Shelves lined with books, photo albums stacked in careful rows, and on the kitchen table, plain as day, another envelope. This one was addressed to a lawyer. Emily didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, she wandered through the rooms. The cottage felt frozen in time. The wallpaper in the bedroom was faded rose. A sweater still hung on a chair. Mugs waited patiently in the cabinet. This was not where Holly had died, but where she had lived. The realization settled over Emily like a shroud. Nate had put his mother in assisted living, told everyone she was too fragile to be alone. But this place, this untouched, deliberate place, told a different story. One of banishment, not care. And yet, Holly had left this home, this secret, to her. Not to her son, not to her daughter, but to the daughter-in-law who wasn't even sure she'd be married much longer. Back at home, Nate's behavior shifted. Suddenly he remembered how to cook dinner. Suddenly he brought flowers. When she told him about the will reading, he barely flinched. "We'll go together," he said, his voice syrupy. "I'm sure she left a few things to everyone." But Emily already knew. She knew something had changed. She felt it in the way Nate watched her now, not with affection, but calculation. At the law office, everything broke open. Holly hadn't left a few things to her children. She'd left them nothing but words sharp enough to scar. To Nate, "I leave you my forgiveness, though you haven't earned it." To Chelsea, "I leave you my wedding ring, so you remember what broken promises look like." To Emily, everything else. The house, the investments, the accounts, even the journals, all of it. Stunned silence followed, then rage. "This is insane," Chelsea hissed. "She barely knew you." Nate's face had turned a shade of gray Emily had never seen. "You manipulated her," he snarled. "You isolated her so she'd give you everything." But when the lawyer played the recording, a video Holly had filmed, lucid, unsparing, their protests withered. "This is what you raised, Ben," Holly said to the camera, her voice thin but unwavering. "Children who only show up when there's something to take." Emily didn't speak. She didn't need to. The room and the dead woman watching from the screen said enough. And just when Emily thought she'd grasped the full extent of the inheritance, the lawyer handed her a third envelope. Holly's final message, one she was told to read alone. Inside, a single sentence written with the same sharp, steady hand. "Forgive no one. Let them beg, let them kneel, and when they do, smile, turn and walk away." What would you do if someone left you everything, and nothing was what it seemed? Could you walk away from the only family you've ever known, even if they never truly loved you? Emily had just inherited a legacy soaked in silence and shadows, but what she would find in Holly's journals would change everything. The morning after the will reading, Emily awoke in the cottage to the scent of pine and the eerie hush of early dawn. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then the ache in her chest reminded her. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was watchful. She padded barefoot into the kitchen, the floorboards groaning softly beneath her steps. Sunlight sliced through the curtains, revealing the faint outlines of decades-old fingerprints on the cabinet handles. She hadn't touched the journals yet, though they'd called to her from the bookshelf like whispers through a closed door. But that morning, she did. She picked one at random, leather-bound, dated 7 years ago. The first page was written in Holly's unmistakable hand. "Jack's been gone a year today. I lit a candle, but it doesn't warm the air. Nate didn't call. Chelsea sent a card, no return address. It was blank." Emily's throat tightened. She read another. "Emily came by with soup. She doesn't know I'm watching her. How gently she sets the spoon down, how she always looks me in the eye. Not like the others. She listens. I wonder if she even realizes what a gift that is." She snapped the journal shut. The air suddenly felt too thick, the quiet too loud. Emily went outside, stood barefoot on the dew-covered porch, the cold biting at her skin. She wasn't ready for what she was finding, because the truth was she'd never really wanted to know Holly. She had simply been present, but apparently that had been enough. Back inside, her phone buzzed. "Nate?" She let it ring. She made coffee instead, breathing in the dark roast like a grounding ritual. But the voicemail that followed was like a hammer to her ribs. "You've made your point. You have the house, the money, but if you think this is over, it's not. Chelsea's filing a petition. We're not just going to let you walk away with everything." Emily stared at the steaming cup in her hands. So this was it? The truth was on paper. Holly had documented their absence, their cruelty, but they were still going to fight her. And why wouldn't they? Greed never bowed to truth. It only sharpened its teeth. Later that afternoon, Emily returned to the law office. Mrs. Cross, always immaculate in her gray silk blouse and understated jewelry, met her with a look that was half sympathy, half steel. "We expected this," she said, handing Emily a folder. "Your sister-in-law's attorney filed a formal contestation this morning, claims undue influence. They're painting you as an opportunist." Emily let out a bitter laugh. "Do they think I wanted any of this?" Mrs. Cross arched a brow. "They think you got it. That's enough." She pulled out a flash drive and placed it gently on the desk. Holly recorded hours of testimony in her final weeks. She described everything: conversations, absences, patterns of neglect. She even anticipated the arguments they'd use. "We'll win." "But what if we do?" Emily said quietly. "What if I do win?" "Then what?" "I live here, in this ghost of a house, surrounded by her pain. I keep running her foundation while they spread lies about me. I become the villain in their story because I didn't walk away empty-handed." Mrs. Cross didn't answer immediately. Then she said softly, "You asked what you'd do if someone left you everything and nothing was what it seemed. Now you know." Emily left the office more burdened than when she'd entered. She drove without thinking, ending up at the edge of Maplewood Park, where Nate had proposed 3 years earlier under the oak tree. She'd been in love then, or thought she was. Love, she'd since learned, looks very different under the fluorescent lights of a hospital room where no one else bothers to show up. That night, she pulled another journal from the shelf. This one was dated just 6 months ago. "I heard Nate's voice on the phone again today. He was asking Emily for something. Again. Money, I think, or time, or care. He only calls when he needs something. He stopped calling me altogether. Emily says it's just how he is, but she's wrong. It's how I let him become." Emily turned the page. "I wonder if in the end she'll realize the truth, that I chose her, that she wasn't just a witness to their absence, but the counterweight to it. The proof that love doesn't need blood to be real." Tears slipped down Emily's cheeks, not from sorrow, not even from guilt, but from something else, something older, a recognition. This legacy wasn't about the house or the money or the center she'd barely begun to build. It was about rewriting a story, not just Holly's, but her own. And she couldn't do that if she kept living in a space haunted by someone else's silence. The next morning, she did something she hadn't done in months. She opened a blank notebook. On the first page she wrote, "This is where it begins again, not with what they left behind, but with what I choose to carry forward." Then she flipped to the next page and began to write. "What would you do if someone handed you not just their fortune but their unfinished story? Would you walk away or pick up the pen and keep writing?" Because what Emily finds next, buried beneath floorboards and between pages, will challenge everything she thought she knew, even about herself. The truth is still waiting. The day of the court hearing dawned gray and cold, as if the weather itself had chosen to mourn the version of family Emily had once believed in. She sat in the back seat of a cab outside the courthouse, watching people rush by, briefcases in hand, collars turned up against the wind. She felt strangely removed from it all, like a ghost observing the world she'd once belonged to. Everything about the day felt surgical, cutting, clinical, inevitable. When her name was called, Emily entered the courtroom beside Evelyn Cross, her lawyer, who carried a quiet confidence like armor. Nate was already seated, Chelsea too. Their posture stiff, their expressions composed like actors playing characters they still hoped to believe in. But Emily could see it, the cracks beneath the veneer. And when the judge entered, bringing with him the formality of consequence, she felt her breath steady. The proceedings began. Chelsea's attorney spun a story of manipulation, a grieving elderly woman coerced by a younger woman into rewriting her will. Emily was painted as cold, calculating, someone who'd preyed on loneliness to secure her fortune. It was nauseating, but expected. And then it was their turn. Evelyn stood, calm, precise. She unfolded documents, psychiatric evaluations, emails, even Holly's own writing in journals and letters. Then she pressed play on a recording. Holly's voice filled the room, fragile but unwavering. "I know what they'll say after I'm gone, that I was confused, that I wasn't in my right mind, that Emily tricked me. But I want the court to know the truth. I was more clear in those final months than I had been in years. Sometimes dying shows you who really lived with you, and who merely shared your roof. The courtroom went still. Even Chelsea looked away. When the judge delivered his decision, upholding the will, rejecting the challenge, and ordering the petitioners to pay court costs, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a burial of what might have been, of all the apologies that had never come. Outside, Nate followed her to the steps. "Are you happy now?" he asked, voice low. "You burned everything to the ground." Emily looked at him, for the first time really looked. Not as the man she had loved, or the man she had wanted to believe could change, but as the man who had stood back while his mother died alone, and who now stood before her asking the wrong question. "No, Nate," she said softly, "but I'm finally free." She turned and walked away, and for the first time since Holly had died, Emily didn't look back. Over the next few months, she buried herself in work at Holly's Haven. She read every journal, digitized every recipe Holly had written in her shaky script. She opened the first grief support group for adult children estranged from their parents. A quiet, raw gathering where people spoke truths they had never said out loud. The walls that once echoed with silence now pulsed with laughter, music, even the occasional argument over who made the best lasagna. One evening, she found a letter tucked between the pages of a 1998 journal. It was from Ben, Holly's late husband. The ink was faded, but his words still breathed. "Holly, if you're reading this alone, it means I'm gone. And if I know you, you've given our kids too many chances already. You always had a heart bigger than mine. But maybe, just maybe, you'll give that heart to someone who deserves it. Someone who'll know what to do with the things we've built. If you found her, let her have it all." Emily held the letter to her chest. She didn't cry. She simply sat in the quiet of Holly's bedroom and felt, for once, the weight of being chosen lift into something lighter, like grace. The book came a year later. The Letter That Set Me Free hit shelves quietly, then with a storm. Emily was invited to interviews, podcasts, panels, but she never chased the spotlight. She always circled back to the center, to Holly's Haven. That's where she belonged. Sometimes people came just to see the place where the woman with the inheritance story lived. But most came to find a chair, a cup of tea, and someone to talk to. And Emily gave them that. She gave them everything she had learned in the hardest way. 2 years after Holly's death, Emily stood under the great oak tree behind the cottage where a plaque now read, "In memory of Holly Walsh. A voice, a fire, a witness." The spring wind stirred her hair as she placed fresh wildflowers at its roots. Around her, the community center hummed with activity, a birthday celebration in one room, a knitting group in another. "Everything's blooming again," she whispered, "just like you wanted." That night, she sat at her desk, now filled with both her writing and Holly's. Her inbox chimed, an email from Chelsea. Subject line, "I don't deserve an answer." "Emily, I know I burned every bridge. I know I lied. I know I made you the villain because I couldn't stand to look in the mirror. I won't ask for anything. Just thank you for staying when we didn't." Emily stared at the screen for a long time. Her hand hovered over the keyboard. Then she closed the laptop. Outside, the wind picked up. The story was over, and she had already written her ending. How did this story make you feel? Were you surprised by where it led in the end? Share your thoughts below. If this story moved you, comment 100 to let us know. We'd love to know, what country are you watching from? Share this video with a friend who needs a reminder that sometimes the quietest voices carry the deepest truths. Thank you for watching Life Stories.